Welcome back to the Village Bonfire for another episode of the Wild Sacred Journey podcast. A podcast not just for your mind, but for your body and spirit too. Here we don't just talk theory. Instead, we compassionately engage with our lived experiences and a wide variety of topics together, all to invite the question, in these times we find ourselves in, how do we be more human? Thank you for being here. May these conversations awaken, inspire, repair, and evolve something deep within each of us and serve the wild, tender aliveness of our personal and collective hearts. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Wild Sacred Journey podcast. So this is a bonus episode, actually, in honor of the Spring Equinox. And I'm standing today to record because I'm just really feeling the buzziness of the season and just, needing to be on my feet and able to kind of sway and move a little bit more. So I invite you too to actually just check in with wherever you're listening. And, there's a lot of situations in our society and in our world that sort of ask us to kind of be in these forced postures, these forced stillnesses for a long time. And so maybe you need to be in one of those. But if you are in one of those and actually you have the freedom to move your body if you need to, then maybe you actually do that. I was actually thinking about recording this on a walk, and I just didn't think I'd be able to get the sound quality quite good enough. So sticking with the microphone. But if you want to listen to this outside on a walk, that would probably be great. So go ahead and light our candle. This one's getting a little low. There, we get our village fire going. This day of the equinox is also the shift from Pisces to Aries this year, and the beginning of the astrological new year, shifting from water to fire sign. So there might be something there for you to notice as we open our village fire and step around it. Maybe even just tuning into the different quality of gathering around a fire in the dark days of winter versus in kind of the warmer days of spring and of summer, right? And there's a very different energy to those types of fires. And so perhaps we just notice that, this feels like a different gathering energy, a different fire energy today. So spring equinox in the Northern Hemisphere, it would actually be fall equinox if you were in the Southern Hemisphere. So I'll kind of speak mostly to spring equinox just because that's where I am in the world. And that's kind of the energy that I'm really steeped in right now. And if you are in the Southern Hemisphere and you're tuning into this, then you can just kind of tune in from the sort of opposite perspective of what I'm saying, right? So spring equinox, we have a lot of ideas about what this is, right? We've got Easter, we've got this idea of new growth, of planting new seeds, of kind of this blossoming, this expansion, this coming out, this unfurling after the darkness. And we feel that in our bodies, right? Like, oh my gosh, I just can't be inside. Oh my gosh, I just can't sit still, just wanting to be out in the sun, wanting to hear the bird songs are coming back. And it's like, we want to hear them, and everywhere, where and obviously there are some places where the seasons are more even year round, but in places where the seasons change more, you're starting to notice more flowers coming out. And there's just, there's this blooming and this unfurling, but the thing that I often feel like, you might've heard me joke before, I feel like I carry a lot of hag energy. So I feel like I'm always the one that's like, remember the darkness, remember the death. But, and so there's a certain amount of that I think I'm going to be taking a stand for today. But the beauty of the equinox is that these are actually equal darkness, equal light, right? So this is the midway point between sort of that depth of darkness of the winter solstice and the brightness, the extreme brightness of the summer solstice, right? So this is actually, even though there's a lot of this like churning, pushing, stretching energy that's kind of present right now in the world, if you're in that Northern Hemisphere, in that springtime space, don't forget, at least right now, at least for this day, don't forget that darkness, that pause point of balance between the two on the way to more lightness, right? So, and I think about that in terms of like, if you think about your breath, right? So if summer is actually the peak of your inhale, right? If you were to take your inhale, fill yourself up, and then hold at the top. That's kind of that summer solstice vibe. Breathe if you haven't yet. And then if you think about winter being that bottom, that empty, right? So if you exhale all the way out and then hold that emptiness just for a moment to feel that. And so that's that winter solstice. And if you're then breathing, just noticing the movement of the inhale and the exhale. So not the extremes of it, but the act of the filling, the act of the emptying. Then if you could tune in deeply enough, and find that halfway point where you're exactly halfway full and halfway empty, that's where you are in the solstice, in the equinox, right? And so, I think it's important to remember a lot of times too, we often have very disorganized breathing actually in our modern world. So if you're actually breathing, quote unquote, properly, then your inhale is actually a downward moving. Your diaphragm moves down. Your pelvic floor actually moves down as you breathe in. A lot of times we think of an inhale as this upward lifting energy, but actually the systems of your body tend to move down more as you inhale. So if you breathe in, your diaphragm moves down to give your lungs room to fill, your pelvic floor moves down, right? So there's a downward moving rooting action that happens there. As your diaphragm moves down, your diaphragm also starts to massage your digestive organs. So there's an elimination process, a digestion and then elimination process that also happens even as you're taking in this air, right? So there's sort of this air earth kind of thing that's happening there where the air is expanding and then the earth is like rooting or moving in response to that. And then the earth kind of lifts up to push the air out, right? And to dissipate the air. So, here, if we're kind of in that expansion state in the spring equinox, if we're in that inhalation, right, the taking in to kind of build towards that summer peak, then there is still this rooting action that is happening. And so if we kind of find ourselves in that halfway point, we can find ourselves in this place where we're half rooted, half expanded, right? So, and farming, I farmed for many years. So this is a time of year where, yes, you're starting to plant, but it's a really busy time of year because you're tending the soil. You're really like things are waking up. And so there's a lot of stuff that isn't directly connected necessarily to the tending of the plants, to the harvesting the fruit, right? That's all going to come later. There's a lot of stuff as the seeds are going in. There's a lot of other stuff that's happening in the background to help enable a robust growing season in the summer when there's more light, when there's more of that happening, right? And so this really is in some ways still a time of tending the soil, right? The seeds have gone in, and maybe depending on the timing and what seed, maybe there's that first radical root that's gone down from it. Maybe a new sprout is starting to come up, but it's still pretty early for that. This is still really laying the foundational work. And I think a lot of times we want to rush the stage because there's this like explosiveness, this almost aggression actually to this season, this bursting forth into the warmth, into the sun after these colder, dark days, right? But we can't rush this like slow tending that our seeds will actually need, right? Because they'll need to take root, they'll need to grow, they'll need to bear fruit. And that will happen as things continue to get brighter, continue to get warmer, right? But how set up we are and they are for that success still starts now in this foundational soil tending tending the darkness kind of space, right? So, there's this, stay with the foundation in preparation for what feels like a marathon later, right? And again, in our society of kind of this constant focus on like, what's next, and the product, right? What are we producing? We forget that there's this, that this equal point really matters, actually. And so there's like something too, I feel like oftentimes this season we associate kind of with pastel colors, right? And babies and fluffy little creatures and tender shoots and all of this like sort of deceptively like soft and gentle kind of things, right? Because we're sort of smoothing over actually in some ways, again, so our society in terms of the progress and the what are we producing and sort of trying to skip this step, we're also, to the extent that we acknowledge it, it's like we're sort of almost smoothing it over, rounding the edges a little bit, trying to make it fit into some sort of maybe slightly bypassy, joyful kind of experience, right? When in reality, this moment where the quickening, so February 1st, Imulk, in the belly, that's the quickening, right? So there's a quickening that's starting. And so the quickening is happening, right? Like we are in the quickening now. But if you're likening this to a birth or a rebirth, as it were, then as with any birth, death portal, there's an immense amount of mystery, an immense amount of initiation, an immense amount of surrender and being willing to just be like torn apart, unbecome in order for something new to emerge, right? So we become the soil, or we become the shell that's around the seed that has to crack fully open for that root to come out, right? And we have these ideas of what, we put these seeds in the ground, and in theory, we think we know what's going to come from those seeds later, right? And there's a certain amount of like the seeds that we plant will determine to a certain extent what fruit we get, but the soil will also determine what fruit we get, right? What nutrients are present determines, is it more leaf or is it more fruit? And is the fruit misshapen or is it like luscious? And is it, right? There's all these other factors. And, back before we had these more controlled hybrid seeds, sometimes you didn't totally know, or maybe you didn't label your seeds very well to begin with. And so then you're kind of like, oh, like, that's a surprise. That wasn't what I was expecting, So there's a little bit of a mystery involved. Like we don't actually know what's going to come from what we're planting now, right? So that's sort of that idea that we have to surrender the results, do the work, but surrender the results, right? And so, there's really a reckoning actually kind of in this season, because it's really inviting us to get aligned with what it is we say we're wanting to grow, and to surrender then completely, to allow ourselves to unbecome here as this quickening continues to quicken, as we invite that inhale in, and we're sort of holding that space between the empty and the full. And that full is going to change us, right? Like anytime we invite something foreign into our bodies, something that isn't currently part of us we are being changed by what we're bringing in, right? And so as we're inhaling here, we're being changed by what we're growing, by what we're planting, by what we're bringing in. So that's actually a perfect, a perfect alignment too then with the fact that, like I said, this is the astrological new year. So there's a new beginning happening there. This is also the beginning of the eclipse season, the spring eclipse season. So there's kind of two eclipse seasons that happen in the spring and in the fall. And eclipse seasons are also portals, a lot of lessons that can come through, a lot that it's more shadow coming up than light, right? Because it's about sort of how our shadow can shift, how shadows can shift the perception of like the order of things, right? And so, you know, symbolically anyway. And so, yeah, so eclipse season has sort of a reputation for being a reckoning too. And so here we are in this spring reckoning. And also then in the fall equinox, we would also sort of be in a reckoning, because we're then on the downward side, we're in the releasing and the beginnings of the death process that take us deep into winter, right? So yeah, and so there's a reckoning here, but what are we letting go of? What are we saying yes to, right? Because every yes is a no to something, and every no is a yes to something. So there's a little bit of like some of that question. And so for me, this feels like it points a little bit to what in my mind anyway, is a little bit of a distinction between life and aliveness. So I think sometimes when we talk about life, to me anyway, that feels like it's without reference to death, right? Life is the thing that begins when we're born, that ends when we die. And maybe it's challenging, but in general, we try to kind of focus on the positive and the sunny, and, you know, it's something good. It's something to be worked for. It's, you know, it's what our Western medicine is constantly sort of striving to uphold, right? And aliveness to me is a little more feral, a little more wild. It feels like it includes death. It includes sort of that shearing process of change, of transmutation, of transformation, of evolution, of diversification that we see around us in nature. It's also not like life in the same way. Like often when we say the word balance, that feels to me like there's this fixed point we're aiming for, rather than, which is fine. There is a moment where you find that balance, right? But balance is sort of a constantly shifting based on other factors that are happening around us, right? And so to find balance isn't going to be the same in every season and in every situation, right? And balance is really just one moment on the way to whatever else is happening, right? And so it's kind of the same for me with aliveness versus life in some ways. Like life maybe is like a moment in this greater process of aliveness. And so aliveness for me is sort of more of a journey, a process. It's bigger than just me. So when I personally am in service to aliveness, I'm in service to my own aliveness, but I'm also in service to this greater aliveness that is happening in this web of kinship, right? And this greater web of aliveness that's like the ones who've come before and the ones who will come after, right? So for me, it feels like it's a process, and it's cyclical. So I'll kind of start to wrap here for now for this little bonus episode. But so a couple questions then that you might want to sit with on this equinox, right? So if you're in the spring equinox, then it would be like, what are the ways you can tend the soil or tend the aliveness of the season? What would feel like a good way to like clean house for your body, right? So maybe that's a cleanse, a food cleanse, you know, as the days get longer, I find my body anyway naturally wants sort of less heavy, dense foods and wants to move more towards water-based, lighter foods. So it may be a perfect time to do a cleanse, actually, if that's, you know, medically available to you. You could do a ritual bath or shower, an exfoliation, a haircut, a massage, right? Like all of those are ways you can actually tend the soil, tend the earth, tend the aliveness of your body, so that whatever lessons you're going to be learning in eclipse season, whatever seeds you're planting personally, internally for your own growth in service to both your aliveness and the larger aliveness, like have that good soil to grow in. And then another question might be, what would feel like a good way to prepare the soil or the aliveness of your home space, right? Or your office space or whatever physical spaces you find yourself in. So maybe if you have an altar space, maybe you actually feel called to like close that down or do a deeper clean or reopen it. Or if you don't have an altar space, maybe this is a good time to open one. Maybe you're going to be cleaning your house or getting rid of stuff or both. Maybe you're going to be doing some sort of smudging or seining or smoke cleansing ritual. Just be conscious with that if you are doing that you're engaging with the plants in a respectful way and are, do what you can to educate yourself on sustainability of some of the different herbs and some of the ways that power and systemic privilege are currently, affecting the availability of those herbs for cultures who have long traditions of holding them. So sage, for example, in the so-called US. Anyway, that's a subtopic. But anyway, you can, and there are plenty of people who have a lot to say on that if you Google that and look at cultural appropriation and smudging, you'd be able to find something, I'm sure. So just be aware of that if you're engaging with that practice. Cultures all around the world have different smoke bathing or smudging, if we want to call it that, practices. And so yes, you want to be in relationship with the land that you're on, but also see if you can be in integrity with ancestors and see if you can be in sensitivity to systems of power and systemic power and privilege. So anyway, that would kind of be, it may be too, if you have a garden, then you're going to be naturally kind of engaging with this process as you're sort of tending the garden and cleaning up things and getting it ready. And maybe you're singing to the plants. Plants love to be sung to, actually. So maybe you're singing to your plants or doing something else to just, honor and be in that space of sort of tending and caretaking and inviting in aliveness while honoring the decay and the whole process that brought us to the aliveness. And then the other question would be like, what's a good way maybe to prepare the soil of your relationships or your community, or if you run a business of some kind, your offerings in the world, right? And so maybe that's a vision board or some sort of divination practices with tarot or, something else. There's lots of different, there's pendulums, there's cowrie shells, there's all kinds of different processes. This is apparently a very popular time. Astrologers, I've heard a couple different astrologers say that it's a very popular time for people to get readings from them. So maybe you're getting a reading from an astrologer about, a relationship or a community or or on behalf of, I should say, not about, but that's like surveillance state divination, and that's not useful. But on behalf of relationship or community or your business or your offerings, right? Maybe you invite people over for a meal. Maybe you have a bonfire, a village fire in the evening that you gather around and you do a potluck and everybody brings something, right? And you share, or you feed them. If there's conversations that need to be had and need to be, the air needs to be cleared, temper like the sort of aggressive energy of the season, right? With some of that, like, the quiet, sort of simplicity and tenderness of winter, right? So see if you can find a balance there. But this might be a good time to start to kind of clear some of the air and just invite in some fresh communication or some fresh, shared values and visions and sort of a sense of fresh gathering. And so I'll leave that there. Like I said, if you're kind of down in the Southern Hemisphere, then this would be your fall equinox. And so you'd be kind of looking at, okay, we're moving towards darkness. So what is needing to be released? What is needing to be laid to rest? What is needing to be closed? How are we putting the soil to bed for the year? so that things can slumber well and rest well and store their energy and, have the nutrients and the care and the support that it needs to get through sort of those long, dark, harder days. Yeah, so I'll leave it there, but let me know. I don't know, how's the spring treating you? I feel like I'm just kind of a yo-yo in a lot of ways, and that's not inaccurate to the energy of the season. So um yeah, I'm feeling ready for this portal that's for better or worse just gonna finally bring something through, right? So yeah, so let me know what you think. Let me know maybe what you're doing to celebrate spring equinox. And yeah, may you be well. And I'll see you next time around the fire. Hi, Kate here again. Thank you for gathering with us. Whether you've been here a while or found your way here thanks to today's guest, it means so much to me and the world I dream of to have you here. I hope you'll tune in for more of our conversations. We humans seem to be at a profound threshold and facing questions of deep impact for the future and the world. We need our full hearts and humanity as we sow seeds of change in these times of joy and heartbreak. I count myself lucky to be here now, around this virtual village fire, weaving our stories into a medicine with humans like you. As a community medicine space, this podcast is relational. It weaves webs of connection and mutual respect and care across time and space. If you appreciate and support the future we're seeding here, you can support the weaving of this web in a few ways. 1, share episodes with friends and family or online with your community. It also helps the podcast immensely if you like, rate, subscribe to, or follow the podcast where you watch or listen, so you get notified when new episodes drop and new listeners find us as they search. 2, join us on Patreon. Doing so supports conversations like the one you just heard and allows you access to live community gatherings and medicine circles and more as we continue to grow. It also helps me keep the space advertisement free so the conversations stay intact as they are. If you have questions, suggestions, connections, or would like to find out more about working with me, you can find me online at www.wildsacredjourney.com, on Instagram at wildsacredjourney_KP, or email me, kate@wildsacredjourney.com. Until next time, from my heart to yours, I release today's fire with a prayer for our individual and collective wholeness, connection, and joy. May it be so.